Welcome back to 30 Days of Podcasting, your home for all things podcasting, from idea all the way through to monetization at the end. Today, we're looking at interviews to try to help you become more comfortable talking with other people. A lot of people struggle with interviews. They don't know what to do. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what questions to ask, how to edit them. Interviewing. How do you even go about it? Like, what are the tips? What are the tricks? What things work? What doesn't work? What doesn't work is just to schedule it and to go in blind. Let's say we have an interview. Yesterday, we had Rob from Libsyn on. If I went into that interview knowing nothing about Libsyn, nothing about hosting or anything that he was involved with Libsyn, it'd be a very awkward interview because we'd just be chatting. Wouldn't really be an interview about hosting. So plan out what you're going to talk about. You may not stick to it. You may follow rabbit trails, but have a general idea of who this person is that you're talking to, what you're talking about, and how does that fit into your show, your why? How does it fit into your niche, your audience? Does this guest actually bring value to your audience? So how do we actually talk with someone and bring value out of it? You know how to talk to people online. We've been doing Zoom for the past year. So how do you ask good interviews? Well, you start by asking open-ended questions. You hear this a lot. You've heard this a lot. But what is an open-ended question? Well, it's something that can't be answered with a simple yes or no, or a simple short sentence. So, how are you doing today? Is a closed question. I'm good. I'm well. Doing great. I've had better days. Whatever. It's a short answer. It's closed. That question has been answered. Move on. An open-ended question. How do you feel is a lot more open because it's not just going to be, well, I feel good. People are going to talk about their feelings. They're going to expand. They're going to explain why they feel the way they feel about what. And if they don't, you can ask a follow-up question that opens it back up. So how do you feel about the Red Sox breaking the curse? Man, that was exciting. It just brought pride to my city, to my heart. We've been waiting a long time for this to happen. Okay, well, what about their win do you take personal ownership in that brought you that pride? An answer that makes sense for a Sox fan. I don't know. So asking open-ended questions is going to get more conversation. It's going to get more story out of it. It's going to get better exposition about how to do something. It's going to get better points for debate if that's what you're going for. Sometimes interviews can just get uninteresting. Cut it down. Get what you need. Just because you have an interview that lasts for an hour and a half doesn't mean you have an hour and a half of content. You might only have 32 minutes of usable content from that. And that comes through editing. Cut down to what matters to your audience. Where's the value? Where's the value? Listen when you ask a question and you're listening. Don't listen to respond. A lot of people will listen so that they can respond and be a part of the conversation. If you're having a guest on your show, odds are they're going to be an expert in something. You're going to be asking them questions about something, and they need to have a room to talk. If you're listening to be a part of a conversation, well, then it's not an interview. You're having a guest host. That's different. I'm talking about an interview where you're talking with someone trying to get something out of them to provide value to your audience. Make it an interview. You're asking them questions to get their expertise, to get their opinions, to get their feelings, to get their thoughts. You want it to be all about them. They should be the star of that episode. This is difficult to do. And that's why we're spending 3 days on interviewing, because a lot of people try and a lot of people do okay. But if you really want to excel at interviewing, to bring that value, to make your podcast the best it can be, you have to practice. You have to practice asking open-ended questions and listening. There's really 3 main reasons that we do interviews. One is to get a good story. If you have a podcast that has guests on, that has interviews, you want them to have a story because that's where people connect. I could sit up here and I could talk for hours about whatever. I could talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, start to finish. I love it. That's my jam. I'm a nerd. It's cool. Whatever. But it's a Wikipedia. If I'm just giving you facts about the Marvel Universe, it's okay. I can get that somewhere else. What people connect with is the story. So have your guests tell a story. How do you feel? How did that make you feel? Ooh, when this happened, draw out some more details. What did that look like? Where were you? What did that sound like? Okay, now you describe this place, and like I just got to know, like, what did that smell like there? It it brings the details to the story, the color to the audio. Because if I'm listening to a podcast about a social worker who went out to this call and they had this house that was just wretched, it was dilapidated, and there was people living there that shouldn't have been because it was unsanitary. Like I might want to know, like, what did that smell like? Okay, what did the walls look like? What did their beds look like? Did they have beds? Like, how did they store food? Like, what did that look like? To draw the details in, because you could just have the story told, we had this family living in a rundown house and we had to help them out. That's not a good story. That doesn't help draw in your audience. So ask the questions to get the story. Another reason for interviews is a good teaching, an exposition, a how-to. If I have an expert on and I want them to tell us how to do something, I need to ask good questions to make sure that we're getting those answers. So you might have a list of questions, and in order to get those answered, you need to kind of ask them in an order. But you also need to keep that conversation as an interview. So it might be a how-to. Okay, how do we record a podcast? Well, first thing you're going to do is you're going to go up here and make sure you have your right equipment selected. Great. How do we make sure that we have the right equipment selected? Well, you're going to go to this and you're going to select this and blah, blah, blah. And here you go. Excellent. So once we have it selected, what's next? It's kind of open, but it's a how-to, so it's kind of closed because what's next is a specific thing. It's not going to be like, well, next you expand the universe and you wander off. It's specific because it's a how-to. But you can ask questions in an open way so that they're not like, and then you put peg into hole, and then you add glue. Like it doesn't have to be robotic. It can be a conversation. It's just an interview. It's a guided conversation. I hope that you've gotten some value from this today. Ask me your questions about interviewing. We're on the socials at 30 Days of Podcast on all of them, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on TikTok at content.crunchy is the username there. And ask your questions. What does it take to make an interview? What are your questions about interviewing? So ask them, and I will see you on the socials, and we'll see you tomorrow with our guest, Andrew Ellerman from Podcast Guests. Have a good one.